Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammy. Hey, Cammy.
Hey, Bryant.
What's going on? How you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm glad we're both good because what we're talking about today is a little grim.
You with the
talking.
dad jokes.
I know. Yeah. So Mythstorie today, we're going to talk about the concept of the Grim Reaper, and we talk about this and many subjects similar to this, covering all sorts of different myths and legends throughout time and space. The Grim Reaper is a pretty interesting one. We'll dive into it soon. Cammy's going to give us a story, and then we'll have a nice discussion after that. I have to give a quick shout out before we jump right in, though. A couple weeks ago, we in April. This will come out in May, I believe. But so a couple weeks from when this appeared, there was an awesome. So we are on YouTube. I get tons of spam mainly, but lots of supportive comments, especially from Dave. Hey, Dave. And I had a really weird one because I woke up in the morning, had some spam that was trying to steal my info or your info, and YouTube automatically gets rid of it. And I saw this one other kind of gibberishy looking comment that I just thought was spam, but it was so long. And then after looking at it, I realized that it was someone speaking or typing Welsh. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So we did do a Welsh episode about a year ago on the Welsh otherworld or afterlife. It's a little interesting, or it's very interesting. It's a little different, but a noon is what we called it. We called it the Welsh 101 episode. And we had a fan, a Welsh native from Kimberley themselves, comment about how appreciative they were of the episode. And this coincides as well because we did the episode in honor of my grandfather who passed away due to complications of COVID a year ago now. And so this actually was posted on the anniversary of that happening. So it was just the stars kind of aligned in a weird way. And it really, I think, affirmed for me and Cammy why we do this show, hitting Welsh myth when we never would have known anything about a noon. And now we go toe to toe with a little bit on some of that knowledge. And we got some thumbs up from people. Mint Rose, Rosen Mintus was the YouTuber who commented. We really appreciate that. So hopefully they're listening. If not, it's okay. Check that episode out if you like. But Cammy, let's talk about the Grim Reaper.
Okay, sure. So my sources, I used Wikipedia for this, but they had a free source to a legend that is a Russian legend, Russian folk tales by Alexander Nikolaevich Afanasyev, translated by by Leonard Arthur Magnus. And this, if you watched or listened to our Prometheus and Tantalus episode, this story is very similar to that. So let's just begin. There was a soldier who had served his time under the Tsar and decided to leave the work of war to other men. He had with him his daily ration of 3 biscuits. On his way wandering the land, he came upon a beggar who asked for alms with a bow. The soldier, glad he could help someone less fortunate, gave him one of his biscuits. A little time later, the soldier came upon another beggar. This man also asked for food, and the soldier gave him a second biscuit. A little time passed, and he was hungry, but before he could unwrap his last biscuit and eat it, another beggar came and asked for food. He didn't want to give him only half of his food because he had given a full biscuit to the other beggars, so he gave the man his last morsel. Instead of just thanking him, the beggar said he could have anything that he desired. The soldier thought for a moment and decided he would ask for a deck of cards. The beggar gladly gave him his deck and a sack to keep him in. This sack was special, the beggar warned him. It would keep any catch inside until the soldier decided to let it free. He only had to ask, "Jump in my bag," and it would happen. The cards, he said, would never allow him to lose a game. Happy with his prizes, the soldier went upon his path. He was still hungry, so when he came upon a lake with ducks, he asked the duck to jump in his bag, and it did, and the soldier had duck for dinner. He traveled a little further to an inn in the next town and decided to stay the night. The innkeeper kept the patrons entertained with stories of the Tsar's castle he abandoned due to the devils who took it over. The soldier, thinking of the trickery he held in his deck of cards, decided he would go and rid the castle of the beast. When he got there, the devils were all dancing wildly to unearthly music. The soldier announced his presence and challenged them to a deck of cards. He won easily, and when the devils accused him of cheating, he commanded them to jump in his bag. They did this immediately, and he took them straight to the Tsar for punishment. The Tsar had his men poke the bag with sharp sticks, and when the devils had had enough, they pleaded to be let go and pledged their service to the soldier. They were released from the bag, and the soldier became the Tsar's most trusted advisor of sorcery. For years, the soldier was happy with his position, but suddenly the Tsar became ill. He called upon the devils to do his bidding and begged them to help him heal the Tsar. They gave him a looking glass that showed the presence of death. If death stood at the foot of a person, that person would survive. But if he stood at the head of that person would die. Death was at the foot of the Tsar, so the soldier told the Tsar such. It was later that the soldier's boy became ill, and he used the glass to see Death standing at his son's head. He knew he could not let Death take his boy, so he commanded Death to jump into his sack, and he fastened it. For years, Death remained locked away in that bag, and the people withered but did not die. Everyone in the land became ill or too old to move, and the soldier decided he had been greedy in his triumph. So he, now an old man, pulled out the sack and cut Death from his binding, and Death was free to take all the souls the soldier had spared. And as Death rose up, he looked at our hero in his eyes and said, "Your time has come. Follow me."
Cool. That's a great
you
story.
See the parallels with the
Sisyphus? That's fantastic, and that's a great connection, because the Grim Reaper. That's what I'm going to kind of focus on explaining here, that specific name, because there's so many different personifications of death throughout history and mankind, which is, I think, pretty well known by most people. So the mystery vocab word of the day is psychopomp. Cammy, can you explain what a psychopomp is?
Sure. It's basically a god or other being that brings people to the afterlife.
Yeah, it's a guide, and for some reason, psycho and pomp, is equivalent to guide. But yeah, that's. So I've used. I started off with a Britannica article that was really funny, and then of course Wikipedia, and then also the amateursguide.com, and then I love it, mythology.net, which kind of acts more like a. It reminds me of Pokemon. It talks about the Grim Reaper because it has like a powers section and like Grim Reaper versus anyway.
Wait, is it like is he like a spirit one or
right? I know. Yeah, he's a dark type. But it's just cool. It talks about it in like a funnier way like that. Like there's like Greek mythology ones where it talks about them like they're comic book heroes, which totally makes sense. There's so much parallel between how both of those things are created.
Get on it, Marvel.
I know. I'm sure they are. But for the Grim Reaper, that specifically is tied to the Black Death. 14th century Black Death is really where we see physical references to a being, and it can change throughout all of Western Europe, but there's several striking characteristics. A robed figure, usually skeletal in nature, and usually like with a deep cloak where you can't see their face or it's hard to see them. And what's interesting is they're never exactly malevolent. Many of these figures are not malevolent, and they truly are just like taking you. They're just doing a job. And I like how you said if death's at your head or your foot, then that's what tells it. And it's so superstition-y. It's so like if he's holding it clockwise, or if he's doing this, or if he spits over his shoulder, there's all these things that tell you. So it's like just because you see him doesn't mean it's that bad. Another interesting thing, though, and it looks like the origin of this. So there's lots of different things that could sort of originate this. It's so hard to kind of put a specific idea on it, but many, I get just to kind of clump them, many pagan religions and then the Abrahamic religions sort of specifically have some things. And I never really realized this, but in all of the things that I read, whether it was like a well-written article or just kind of like a blog post about it, they always tied it to the angel of death concept as well. And I never really thought of that, actually. But it's pretty clear that there is this connection there. I mean, when we talk about angel of death, that it sort of is this person who guides you. But especially, I didn't really realize this, in the Abrahamic religions, there's sometimes more of a more malevolent sort of thing to it. There's references to Abaddon as this entity, a king, the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon and in Greek Apollon, in the Latin Exterminans. This is from Revelation 9:11 from the Douay-Rheims Bible. So there's a direct Greek connection there. There's Azrael is also mentioned, especially in Islam, is extremely significant, as death is significant event in Islamic life and theology. It's not the end; it's a continuation, specifically more so than I guess you could say in the other religions. And it also goes with medieval depictions of Christianity too, as far as the like there's these funny memes about how old Bible angels are described as these like multi-eyed, crazy, unfathomable beings, and then they kind of turn into these floaty winged humans later. And but there's also the Greek Thanatos and the Valkyrie. These are specific people, again, not necessarily malevolent, especially with the Valkyrie, who really are like angelic. They're winged women who come down, and they specifically grab warriors to the afterlife for Odin, so that Odin brings the best to his afterlife army to fight when the end times come. So that's sort of the some of the major origins. There's tons out there. Wikipedia has a whole section on the personification of death, and there are just a ton. While there are many regions have the figure that specifically will ferry you across to death or guide you, the psychopomps. The Western European region specifically seemed to have this figure during the Middle Ages who would reap, or in some languages they would say like the bone taker, or things like that. The Mo Man, the Bone Man is what they would call it in the Netherlands.
So much creepier,
yeah,
than Grim Reaper.
Right, yeah. And even there's in Celtic and Breton, there's the Anku or Anyo, is the spirit of the last person that died within a community, and appears as a tall, haggard figure with a wide hat and long white hair, or a skeleton with a revolving head. So that's pretty awesome. They're just like zipping around like that. But the earliest use of the phrase Grim Reaper was in English is this 1847 book called The Circle of Human Life. This was written by Friedrich August Tholuck. He was a German apologetic Christian historian. So he argued for Christianity. He was a Protestant, and he wrote this book. I couldn't really find too much about it. It's had several translations, and that's what I could sort of see that people did that. But it seemed very important, and I guess during this time it was translated, and it would, I think, grims are pretty common, like adjective to reap, someone who is a reaper. So it makes sense. I remember learning when I was a kid, like, that the scythe wasn't just a tool. Like, that's how I first discovered what a scythe was. It was a tool of the Grim Reaper. But then I was like, oh yeah, it's how you harvest your wheat too. So totally makes sense. Also in Western Europe and Germany, they have the personification of death is known as Megerhein, or Meager Hein, Hein being like a common surname, or Pietje de Dood, Peter the Death. So I like it because it seems like in German and Dutch, they use Peter the same way like the British will use Jack. Like, there's tons of bad Jack figures in myth. And then there's like, it seems like Peter is a common myth name figure in German and Western European stuff. But the Slavic areas have a Grim Reaper who's extremely similar, but white robed. Scandinavia, they think that there's a connection to Hel, the Valkyrie, Hel, the Norse goddess of death. Again, she was kind of malevolent, but she was just sort of like Hades, where it's like, this is my job, I take care of this. But Hel evolved into something called Pesta, who carried a broom or a rake, later adopting the scythe and the robe, I guess, as what Europe became more connected. One like fun note that I noticed was in the Romance language, muerte is a feminine noun, and therefore you will typically find in Romance language countries, death portrayed as a feminine figure in many ways. I thought that was kind of wild how that can kind of change the way that you perceive death. So Grim Reaper definitely became popular during European medieval time to explain things, likely has direct connections, as we can see biblically, with things like Abaddon being connected to the Greek Apollyon. It's likely an evolution of these things. We've talked about it a lot of times where the Christianization of Europe involved absorbing old things, changing them, making them more Christian friendly. So I wasn't so surprised. I think the thing that really surprised me was how much the Angel of Death concept is also connected to the Grim Reaper and the Reaper in general, and that totally makes sense. But I was really surprised. The whole connection to the Valkyries wasn't brought up really in many other things. It was a little bit, just mainly that they ferry people, but they're just so angelic in general, you know. Mm-hmm. Like when I'm just surprised that there isn't more to that connection than what I've been able to find. Maybe there's something that I just need to dig deeper, but that was one of my favorite sort of personal connections that I made. But it's a really cool concept, and I really like it. And I was surprised to see that it was so late. It wasn't until 1847 that we got Grim Reaper specifically. But the idea of a boned, cloaked figure holding a tool who takes you pretty darn old, but it became extremely popular, especially during the 14th century, thanks to the Black Death. Thanks, Black Death. Awesome. Well, I think that covers my section. Cammy, do you have anything to add to that before we wrap up?
No, I think we're good.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us here. Tell us what you think about the Grim Reaper. What do you think about death? Leave a comment below. Let us know if you'd like us to cover any subjects, though. We've got some great stuff planned. We just recently talked about some great stuff, and we've got more to come. But let us know what you think. Mythstorie@gmail.com. Our Facebook group's a great way to find us as well. Check the link tree in our description. It's got links to everything that we've got going on right now. But we will see you all next time. Oh, the Bone Man.